Thank you very much to the Program Director, to our Executive Director of Afro-Middle East Centre, Mr. Naim Jina, to our another keynote speaker, Wadar Khanfar, to ambassadors that are here and high commissioners, to my elders here. I see Dr. Squaya is here, who's also President Zuma's envoy on issues around the Middle East, and also my elder brother here, Comrade Ambassador Dango, who also deal with the issues there. To the esteemed speakers that are going to be given a chance, the experts that are here, and the guests that have been invited, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting us and giving us an opportunity on behalf of His Excellency President Zuma and the government of the Republic of South Africa to have some few words on the important topical issues on global security, terrorism, especially the phenomenon that has been referred to as ISIS. A special welcome to all the international guests joining us here today that Naim we have referred to. We hope they will find time to enjoy and know much better about our beautiful country and have a pleasant stay in South Africa. On behalf of our government, we must also congratulate AMEC for this important work that we are doing of actually being part of the global solution to engage about the phenomenon that we experience in our times. Well, what we are doing is very pleasing. Over the last probably 3 weeks, I had an opportunity to be in St. Petersburg, where a number of security experts around the world in Russia, we met and discussed these issues. It's indeed a topical issue, and it shows that the world in unison wants to find solution. We are aware that terrorism remains one of the major global security challenges of our time, and a serious threat to international peace and stability. It affects every country and region in the world. The threat of terrorism has assumed greater proportions, with attacks spreading to larger geographical areas, as we know, and with consistency and frequency. Recent attacks that we have witnessed over the last few months, whether in Belgium, whether it's France, Indonesia, Somalia, Libya, you look also at the question of Egypt, you look at the issue around Nigeria and other areas. They continue the threat the world is facing. And we have all come to a conclusion that no nation can act alone in dealing with this scourge. This scourge of terrorism, irrespective who pushes it, it causes a lot of human untold suffering, where we've witnessed that over the last 3 years or 4 years, there's been a high level of violence, coupled by barbaric and maiming and killing of innocent civilians, not targeted to state infrastructure or targeted to the military, but innocent civilians. But the other issues that has caused problems is the manner in which the world could not respond in a concerted effort to deal with the scourge. We know the situation in Libya, where many Africans have perished in the seas because of the problem that has happened there. Since the establishment of the so-called ISIS, terrorist groups have been evolving. They've been changing the way they do things. Their motivations, financing and support mechanisms, the method of attack, and the choice of targets are constantly changing through the use of new and sophisticated recruitment tactics and funding methods, as well as attempts at gaining and controlling territory. Additionally, the rise of ISIS has impacted on the African terror group CM by inspiring young recruits to join the cause as foreign fighters, because one of the biggest phenomenon is the question of foreign fighters. They don't fight for a particular country or a particular cause, it's just a commercial activity. And they try to emulate the ISIS model in their respective regions, I mean in our own continent. We therefore remain concerned about the growing incident of terror on our continent and the humanitarian and regional security impact it has on our countries, including South Africa. We remain concerned by the growing number of South Africans who are associating themselves with this terrorist organization. Domestically, efforts continue to be undertaken to identify South Africans who want to join terrorist organizations and prevent an expansion in this regard. In addition, we are working with certain communities. I see a lot of our partners here to curb the issue of radicalization. Our biggest challenge is not the final act of a terror act or terror incident. Our biggest challenge is to say, how do we deal with the question of radicalization on a false or pseudo ideology? And if we can do that, half of our work is going to happen, is going to be succeeding. And also deal with the question of recruitment. Fighting radicalization should be part of the counter-narrative. And we must be able to say it is our societal responsibility. No government alone can do it. We need partnership between civil society organizations, and in our country, that's what we are doing. The private sector and communities to fight the scourge. Our understanding of what drives violent extremism and terrorism is protracted unresolved conflicts. Wadar was speaking to them. Too many of the unresolved conflicts in the parts of the world are part of our woes. The governance challenges, how do we actually govern people? Sometimes there are governments who are governing not on the basis of the will of the people and for the people. In our own country, we learn from a document, a profound document, called the Vision for Our Future, the Freedom Chart, that no government can claim authority unless it is based on the will of the people, by the people, and for the people. Therefore, governance challenges will only be involved around those issues, because if we are suppressed or oppressed or marginalized, we have nothing to lose. Those people, one day, they will rise and reclaim what is theirs. Therefore, governance is one of the challenges we face. Then there is this new phenomenon of unilateral and unlawful international actions, where other countries, they don't respect the sovereignty of other nations. They think that through their own might of their military forces or their own economies, they can determine the cause of other nations, instead of working in partnership, collaboration, international solidarity, win-win solution. You can't impose your solution in another country. And very importantly, there are those countries disrespecting the multilateralism mechanism that exists. Then they choose just one day to make certain decisions about countries, irrespective even if a country has about 2 million people, but it remains a country, and it has to be respected as such. Then there is a disrespect for the rule of law, a new phenomenon, the issue around international refugee law and human rights. Because these are some of our challenges that has actually given impetus or is source of our challenges, where certain people are behaving in this funny way of when they have legitimate concerns, but they've chosen to take a route to kill others, occupy land, without actually engaging. We know in our own continent, in the East Africa, we had an Al-Shabaab that continues to represent main terrorist threat and retains the capacity to launch attacks and expands its reach in the region. In our north part of our continent, the past year, we saw the escalation of terrorist activities by ISIS in Libya, Ansar al-Sharia in Tunis, Egyptian Army of the Islam in Egypt, and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic State. Just last week, We saw a wave of suicide attacks on Libyan forces, which resulted in a number of deaths. The Islamic State continued to control large swaths of territory in part of Iraq and Syria, have grown from a single terrorist sanctuary to having a direct presentation and affiliates in more than 18 countries across the world. They continue to benefit from significant flow of foreign terrorist fighters from more than 100 countries. There is this funny thing where people think that if you are going to join this group, you must be from a particular religion. That's not true. And those people who want to use religion is a very dangerous thing. If you want to cause problems in the world, in our own experiences as humanity, don't use religion. Because that's not true. The people are coming from more than 100 countries, fighting there, getting body bags, whether in Iraq, in Syria, everywhere, including Afghanistan. Those people, it was not only about a religion. Or if you want to use race, racism is also very dangerous. There are those people who have fine ideology to radicalize others on the basis of race. In South Africa, we had an experience, Bob Squire will know, during our transition. There were guys that thought that, you know what, a certain race is going to be wiped away. They chose to form a right-wing organization that wanted to take our country to the brink of collapse. While others in other parts of our continent, they use ethnicity or tribalism. Those three, anyone who's a leader, whose politics is not so advanced, will use the three. And when you use the three, you are going to destroy humanity. The ability of ISIS to establish branches outside its core area of operation, attract young recruits, sustain multifaceted digital propaganda campaigns, exploit sectarian conflict, and extensively use social media platforms to accelerate their presence and expand their global footprint is a concern. Because that's where radicalization, that's where unsuspecting recruitment is actually happening. In South Africa, we are concerned, and we are on record expressing this concern about online recruitment of particularly young people who frequent various social media platforms. We have called upon parents and society to help monitor their children online activity without compromising their privacy. Program Director, the net effect of all terrorist organizations and grouping is an increased state of global security that knows no boundaries and nationalities.
Sorry.
It is a situation that should concern all nation states. As we have always maintained, no country or continent, including South Africa, can claim to be immune to the threat of terrorism and violent extremism. We have always believed that the conflict in the world affairs must be resolved through negotiation as opposed to military aggression. This is based on our own experience, which the world hailed as one of the most important successes of our time. We are guided by the values and political convictions of non-racialism, democratic and a prosperous world. South Africa's foreign policy is also guiding us on how do we interact on these issues. We have a commitment, and a proven one, on commitment to promotion of human rights. In our own home we say Ubuntu. Commitment to the promotion of democracy across the world. Commitment to justice and international law in conducting relations between nations. Commitment to international peace and to internationally upgrade upon mechanisms for the resolutions of our conflict. We are committed to economic development through regional and international cooperation and interdependent world. Our counter-terrorism efforts remain guided on the values of human dignity, human rights, and the rule of law, as enshrined in our country's constitutions and Bill of Rights. Normally, you will have a situation, those who believe in human rights, they think that we should not deal with the question of the rule of law. Sometimes they think that they are exclusively, but in actual fact, they are mutually dependent on each other. Without human rights, and then without the security aspects, you can't have human rights. You can't enjoy them. Therefore, the rule of law is very important. Even how we deal with the incidents, we try to balance our security situation and the issues of human rights, working with our communities. We strongly believe that no individual, group, or religion should be targeted for its alleged links to terrorism. One of our biggest challenges this time around, they look at you. What are you wearing? What religion are you in? And actually, even there are certain instances where you say certain things about certain leaders or certain countries, then you get to be targeted. When there is no empirical evidence that indeed we are up to something. In this regard, South Africa will deal with these new challenges, similarly to how we dealt with terror-related challenges in the past, as espoused by the radical sentiment and activities of groups such as PAGAD, Buremak, and others. Our security services have the legal and moral responsibility to tirelessly work towards ensuring that all available measures to safeguard its people and interests, including South African interests, that may be threatened elsewhere, are put in place. South Africa will remain a strong proponent of multilateralism, global governance, and partnership. We therefore continue to actively participate in coordinated global and continental security efforts to counter the manifestation of terrorism, especially in our African continent. Our government has developed a counterterrorism strategy which forms part of the national security strategy for the country. Our strategy contains a range of policies and plans and programs aimed at countering threats of international terrorism and domestic extremism. We need to have model laws and be able to train law enforcement, the justice system, the prosecutors, the judges, and the magistrates on how they should deal with these particular issues. Key part of our strategy base include the respect for the Constitution of the Republic, recognition of our international obligation and agreements, and recognizing that domestic extremism and international terrorism threaten the democratic rights and values of our society, personal safety, and security and development. Domestic legislation, we have also enacted it. It's very important that there is a domestic legislation for all countries, including the strategies that we have done. South Africa is a signatory to all major international counter-terrorism instruments, including 13 UN conventions on terrorism, and supports the UN Global Terrorism Strategy. South Africa as a country also complies with the oversight from international bodies such as the United Nations Security Council, Counterterrorism Executive Directorate. We also have the Financial Action Task Force. It's very important because one of the questions we must ask ourselves, if we are going to actually intervene, you must cut the supply to the terrorist organization. You ask yourself, how does an organization like ISIS has the best weaponry that can possess? Who supplies them with these weapons? And the world must be able to take a united action to say, we can't do business with those groups that are actually killing our people, have no regard for human rights, irrespective of the grievance they have. There are those countries who don't actually respect the international coordinated action. They sell weapons. When you check the intelligence footages we have, they actually even have the best vehicles. Which of these countries are supplying these vehicles? Who's trading there? Then there was a time when they normally occupy most of these oil wells. Who's trading with them in terms of energy? And all those other mineral resources. And if the world continues to do business with individuals that are from those conflicted zones. It's about encouraging it. Therefore, the issue of using the Financial Action Task Force is to be able to monitor that no country becomes a safe haven, either for training, for radicalization, recruitment, and logistical support. Because if countries, they take that particular action and use their own legislation, finance systems that are there, our own financial intelligence center, because these matters are also linked into international organized crime. Your issues of money laundering and others, the issues of selling of arms and ammunition. South Africa is also a member of the Eastern and Southern African Anti-Money Laundering Group and the Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence. We continue to work close with other security agencies in our region through our regional early warning system. We also believe in research. The AU, we have our own African Union Peace and Security Council. The Peace and Security Council is also supported by an African Center for Study on Research on Terrorism, a very important body of knowledge, without the work that we are also getting from the United Nations, so that we can be able to monitor, share our information, including what we call it CISA, which is the Committee of Intelligence for State Securities for Africa. Very important structures, including in our own region, because regions must be able to look at their own challenges. We know that our region, as in the continent, which is SADC, is relatively stable. As we have said, we are working with also the UN Security Council, a clear directorate that deals with these particular issues. As a member of the international community, we share global concerns and indeed pressing requirements to address the phenomenon of large numbers of foreign fighters being thrown into Islamic State. In our own countries, because you find people going out because of their military training. They go there and say they've just made military because that's the only thing they know. They go out into these countries to go and assist governments. But the biggest problem is that when those people from our own countries, they go there, they get involved in combat. Well, we have our Foreign Military Assistance Act that you can't go and do foreign military assistance without actually have been cleared or got the right authority to do so. This is not to say people's movement must be restricted in any way, shape, or form. We know that many South Africans, they travel to conflict-prone areas for a number of reasons. Some South Africans, they go for humanitarian grounds. Others, they go for tourism or business. Either they go for religious regions or pilgrimage. The challenge of trying to profile people, if someone goes to a particular country and that country happens to be in a conflict zone, how do you deal with the situation? We always say our people must be able to interact with our embassies so that we know where they are going and be able to share information that don't go to this particular parts of this country because you might be exposed to either issues of recruitment or you can actually be exposed where there is a war going on there. And it's not an easy thing because if you wanted to securitize it, everyone who goes to either Syria, should you detain them? You can't do so because as South Africa, we're part of a global community. People have a right. This village, all of us, we can go in there, do business, make friends, go and pray, go and assist others like our NGOs are assisting in many parts of the world. But more importantly, if you attempt to have contact, irrespective of the business we are doing, we will be able to detect, working with other agencies of the world, and be able to do some work from an intelligence perspective. In the wake of more stringent travel measures imposed by law enforcement agencies worldwide, in response to the threat of foreign terrorist fighters coupled with United Nations Security Council Resolution 2178 of 2014's obligation to prevent and suppress recruiting, organizing, transporting, equipping, financing, and travel of foreign terrorist fighters, security concerns exist over a call by an Islamic State for terror attacks in the home countries of the returning foreign fighters. the most dangerous thing that can happen when, as security experts, it's not a problem if people, they can go. Well, sometimes they can come back as body bags, but when they come back alive, that's where this false ideology, the destabilization of the world, the evolving attitude of ISIS to say hit at your own home. And we've seen in most kind of a number of countries in Europe where we have this one love doing something, and in other parts. And there is no country that is going to be able to detect that. But therefore, the ability to gather intelligence, work with communities, if an incident happens, we are able to arrest the other members of the cells before they cause too much damage. Partnership with community organization is very important. In our case, we have managed to establish a very fruitful cooperation with a number of community and religious organizations in South Africa who have stood up and said, not in our name. One of the most important things is that no one must actually abuse the religion Islam. Islam does not stand for violence. It does not stand for maiming and killing of people. And there is no religion that we know, whether it's Islam, whether it's a Christian faith, whether it's Buddhism, whether we are worshiping your ancestors, there is no religion that actually allows the killing and maiming of people. Therefore, all those organizations or religious groups whose these rogue people are using their name, they have to stand up and say, not in our name. And in South Africa, we are happy that we have experienced that. These organizations have not only pledged their support to ensuring that no active recruitment will be allowed to take place in their communities, but they have also been proactive in providing talks to their members and young people on the dangers of propaganda and falsehood that associate religion as a basis for taking up arms to fight foreign wars. We want to thank them for rising up to the challenge of building a better and safer communities. One of the reasons why the fight against terrorism will not succeed is certain countries and organizations to polarize certain communities. You go for polarization. As South African government, we don't use this word called religious extremism. We don't. We just say violent extremism and terrorism. It's not in our vocabulary. And you could see, even when you are countering the narrative, Wadar, it's very important to say, what are we really dealing with? And must call it with the appropriate name. Because if the name is incorrect, the narrative and the psyche of our people, the ability to bring them on board to work together to solve the challenge of our lives, of our lifetime, it will not be in a position to succeed. As I conclude, as this conference gets underway for the next 2 days, we certainly hope that these discussions will enrich the knowledge of how some of these extreme groups operate and continue to exist beyond their borders. We hope this analysis will contribute positively in maintaining a public discourse around matters of violent extremism and terrorism so that public education is enhanced. Governments and other organizations, if you don't involve the citizens of the world, this fight will not be actually be dealt with. Global terrorism and violent extremism is one of the leading threats that confront all nations of the world. Recognizing that global nature of this phenomenon, it is our firm view that nations of the world must be united in their approach in dealing with terrorism. In the midst of global security challenges, South Africa will continue to be guided by the noble principles contained in our Constitution and the Freedom Charter. Nation states must be persuaded to address the root causes of terrorism as a critical step to find lasting solutions. Remember the issues we mentioned: marginalization, governance, unilateral action, and others. If we don't address those main issues on how we lead our people, we will have challenges. We reiterate the call for a collective global action against all forms of terrorism and violent extremism to be done under the auspices and the umbrella of the United Nations. We agreed that all our collective effort must be under that particular umbrella. When we have our own views, the UN must reform. You can't have a Security Council that is the same as more than 70 years ago, 71 years ago. And most of their part, when they discuss security challenges, they mostly discuss security challenges of the African continent, without the African continent. Probably some of these issues, when we discuss this so that multilateralism can work, enhancing those institutions that were there, relevant in their time, the world has evolved. Therefore, the UN must change its tune and become more a representative body. Unlike when you have the heads of states, they go to the assembly and less decisions are being made. Only one body makes more decisions. And sometimes that body is non-functional because of the veto powers. When the world is supposed to act in one voice, someone takes another direction. Even that body called the United Nations Security Council is not respected. Even if a decision is not carried through, one country will wake up and make a decision. Therefore, unilateralism will not work. We also support the sharing of information among security agencies and the conduct of joint operation as other measures of dealing with this phenomenon. Program Director, once again, thank you very much for inviting us and for the opportunity to address you. On behalf of our government and people, we wish you a very successful conference. I thank you.